The Kenosha, Wisconsin County District Attorney announced that no charges are being filed against the Kenosha officers that were involved in the shooting of Jacob Blake. So Jacob Blake, just to remind you, is the man that was shot in the back 7 times while going to his car. This I covered over the summer. If you want more details on this case and also a video, the video of what happened, I covered in this video. I will link to it above. But just to give you a quick overview here from NBC, Blake, who was black, was struck by 7 bullets at close range on August 23rd as he walked away from Kenosha. Police officer Rustin Shesky, who had answered a domestic disturbance call. Blake was near a knife when he was shot, state prosecutors have said, and a blade was found in the footwell of the vehicle. So this is what the DA is saying for why there was no charges being laid against these officers. They found a knife nearby. Now, some are saying he was holding a knife, though there has been no evidence of that. And I'm actually going to get to a case in a second in Toronto, Canada, where somebody who was holding a knife was shot and killed by cops, and that cop was charged. I'll get to the details in that, and there's some similarities there. But look, for me, the biggest takeaway here is that this isn't even allowed to go to a jury. Like, that's the issue. When there is a murder, when anybody else, shoots somebody, there is going to be a trial. It's going to go to a jury to look at the evidence. In this case, you have the DA preemptively stopping any proper investigation in terms of a jury looking into it and just saying, no, nothing here to actually charge this officer with anything, even though somebody was shot in the back 7 times and almost killed, but paralyzed. Now, let me get to the case in Canada here. So this happened in, or the charges happened in 2016. Forcilla, who's the officer, guilty of attempted murder in shooting death of Sammy Yatim. Now, there is some, yes, I forget all the details of this case, as it's really hard to explain how somebody can be guilty of attempted murder when the person died, and not just be guilty of murder. But that's a whole other conversation. Basically here you have a situation where Sammy Yatim was on a streetcar in Toronto. He had threatened people on the streetcar, and an officer going to the scene shot him, I believe, 8 times. I'll get to more details in a second here. But shot him, and then he died. And there were actually charges laid against the officer. Apart from even what he was guilty of, the fact is, obviously, it was caught on tape. The officer did it. There was enough evidence there to at least charge him so that there was a jury to look at the evidence. But in the case of Jacob Blake, you don't even get that. But more details here from the Sammy Yatim case. The death of Sammy Yatim occurred early in the morning of July 27, 2013 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Yatim, an 18-year-old Toronto male armed with a switchblade knife, was shot at 9 times and was hit by 8 of those shots fired by 30-year-old Toronto Police Service Officer James Forcillo. After being shot while laying on the floor of the streetcar, he was tasered. He later died from the injuries. The incident occurred after Yatim, brandishing a 12-centimeter switchblade knife in a Toronto streetcar, advanced on a passenger, threatened other passengers, and exposed himself. The confrontation between Yatim and the police was recorded, and footage of it was released publicly, prompting strong reactions across Canada. On August 19, 2013, Forcillo was charged with second-degree murder. On July 30, 2014, he was also charged with attempted murder. On January 25, 2016, he was found not guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter, but guilty of attempted murder. On July 28th, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The next day, he was granted bail pending an appeal of the court's sentence. His appeal was denied, but he was granted parole after serving 2 years in prison. This incident was the only time an on-duty Ontario officer was charged and convicted in the death of a person since the inception of the Special Investigations Unit in 1990. So this is a case where, look, I don't want to act like Canada does this all the time. As you see here, this was the first time an officer was charged and convicted of the murder of somebody. Now, of course, it was over attempted murder, but still, he was actually guilty of something. Now, this is a case where you have, Sammy Yatim, he was threatening passengers. Now, at the time he was killed, the passengers were off the streetcar. It was just Sammy Yatim, and it was the officer. And still, shot him, ended up dying in the hospital later, which is why I think he wasn't guilty of murder, because he died later on. I'm not going to get into details of the case, but I remember it being really weird and confusing how somebody can be convicted of attempted murder and not murder. But I mean, the larger point here is that there were actually charges laid to the point that a jury could look at the case and decide whether or not this officer was guilty or not. But in the case of Jacob Blake, you don't even get that. They decide preemptively. The DA decides, you know what? Sure, there's a video of this murder happening, or sorry, attempted murder happening, but not even going to lay any charges here because we think that Jacob Blake was a threat to the officer and that we're deciding that a jury shouldn't even look at this, and we're just preemptively saying, you know what? Officer is free to go. This is the issue with most of these cases, is that it doesn't even go to a jury. Like, it's one thing if it went to a jury and the jury decided, you know what? The officer was justified in the shooting and he's free to go. But to not even allow it to go to a jury, I mean, this is the issue. This is the major issue in terms of there being no justice whatsoever. If anybody else was caught on camera shooting somebody, I know not everybody is a police officer, but still, shooting somebody in the back, I mean, there would at the very least be charges laid. There would be a jury to decide whether or not that person's guilty. But here, no.